that the American people desperately need to know. And the folks best to tell that are the ones here at Ground Zero and the members of Congress who are deeply concerned about their country and the crisis at this border are here to visit with the local stakeholders and to see firsthand the cause and effect of President Biden and the Biden administration's policies. To kick this thing off, our fearless leader and the chair of the Border Caucus for the United States House GOP Conference, Dr. Brian Babin.
Thank you so very much, Jody. And Jody is our leader down here. I should put this thing together. We have to have a lot of very instrumental, influential stakeholders, law enforcement officers, local people, and some of them many generations are ranchers and what have you. So I just want to thank you so very much. I also want to say thank you for you all being here at this very important event to get the word out on just exactly what is going on down here at the southern border of the United States of America. I want to say thank you to our sheriff. I also want to say thank you to some people who actually, Mark Morgan, former commissioner of CBP, will be joining us in a little bit. Tom Holman, all right, director, Sheriff Louderback, and is going to be and I basically 9 counties from Houston over to Louisiana, Sheriff Brian Hawthorne from Chambers County. So thank you for all of you for being here. This is not political rhetoric, folks. This is the truth. We're going to speak. I'm a plain-spoken guy. I am a dentist by trade and profession, but I've been serving in Congress in my 4th term, and this is one of the most, I think, the most serious questions and issues that we have that this country is facing, and that is an open border. Folks, what's happening down here is not compassionate, as you're hearing from the Biden administration. It is not humane. It is absolutely avoidable. It could have been avoided. You will hear in a little bit that the Biden administration was warned by professionals that if they go away and reverse the policies of President Trump's migrant protection protocols, Title 42 public health restrictions, and do away with our national declaration of emergency, these types of things, stop deportations of folks who have had their cases adjudicated, that a bad crisis would occur, and that's exactly what's happening. We've been through some of these facilities. We went to Ghana yesterday. We saw the Border Patrol down there and the facility that is supposedly going to hold, it had a capacity of 250, and guess what? There are 5,700 undocumented immigrants that are in that facility right now at a cost of millions of dollars every single week. It's incredible what's happening down there. Walking through this facility, in the hallway outside of what they used to call cages during the Trump administration and now are influx facilities, I happened to see a little 3-year-old immigrant, a young girl, sitting in the hallway playing with her toy. And as a grandfather of 17 grandchildren, it just pulls at your heartstrings. There's nothing humane about what's happening here, and the cartels being empowered, and the disaster that is unfolding before our eyes today. And my heart goes out to these people. But the American people, we are the ones who are paying for this thing as they come into this country and empowered the cartels and being lured up here by rhetoric by the Biden administration to open our borders up. And it is incredible what we are seeing today. We are not getting the truth, folks. We are not getting the truth. And that's what we're here to do, is to make sure that this message gets out, that Americans are being, borders are open, We have COVID being to the state of Texas. We found out yesterday they don't even do COVID tests unless these migrants are showing signs of symptoms of COVID, and then they're turned loose into the state of Texas. So without any further ado, I'd like to just say thanks again, and I'm going to bring my co-lead up here, Jodey Arrington from West Texas, and we sure really appreciate what you're doing here as well, Jodey.
Dr. Babin. Okay. It's hard to know where to start, really. It's so overwhelming. And it's having communities here in border states like statement of the a national disaster, and it's this administration, and that's the policy of this crisis. And it doesn't matter whether this administration, our president, will say those words or admit it. All you have to do is come to McAllen, Laredo, and border communities like it all along the southern border to know that we are burning out of control with absolute chaos. Because our commander-in-chief, whose first and most important job is to provide for the common defense of the American people, has abdicated that. We took boats up and down this river with the Department of Public Safety, where Texas is having to step up and fill the gap and pick up the slack, because we have a president who is supposed to represent law and order, who is supposed to be the chief of law enforcement, completely abandoned his citizens in Texas and all across the country. He's the standard bearer for the rule of law and the Constitution. Public safety crisis. Yes, it is a humanitarian crisis. But I would submit to you, it is a constitutional crisis. That word is thrown around all too often. It's abused and misused. But when the President of the United States, who takes an oath to faithfully execute his office and to protect, promote, and defend the Constitution, and the Constitution is clear. The mission of the federal government is to provide for the general welfare of its citizens and a common defense for its citizens. Article 2, Section 3, to faithfully the law of the land. Tell me, President, such a sacred duty and trust from the American people abandoned. No here. Instead of detaining and deporting of this land and securing our border, we are and rewarding, and it's sending a message. One come all, it's a free-for-all at the border. You haven't looked into the eyes of these families who were abused and assaulted on their way over here. We saw them last night. The numbers. Women are sexually assaulted. They're exploited. I don't want to hear the rhetoric from my colleagues in Washington about poor, vulnerable people. The extorted and abused while we empower the drug cartels right across this river. The Biden administration and the United States federal government is not in control of the border. The cartels control the border. And it's not because we don't know how, it's because this administration doesn't have the political will to do it. So no, this isn't compassionate. Look into the eyes of the landowners who stand behind me, the private landowners who have seen more trespassing, more dead bodies, more ransacking of their property. Talk about compassion to the citizens of this community who lead in educating the children of communities in Texas. who will tell you they can't do it responsibly and safely and effectively with the deluge of people coming in front of millions who've waited for years to be United States citizens. Well, we welcome the immigrants in this country, but they must respect our laws, our sovereignty, and the safety of our people first and foremost. And nothing of the sort is happening. Nothing. Look, I've taken more time than I expected, and it's time to hand the mic over to a colleague of mine who's been fighting this fight for a whole lot longer than I have. And he took us off the beat last night where we didn't have the dog and pony shows and PowerPoint presentations. We got folks. Last night, and it's heartbreaking. Louis Gohmert, number one in our hearts.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for being here. We did see up close and personal last night. I've spent so many hours, all hours, day and night down here. Last night we as are out there on the river, nobody's crossing. And the reason so many people do cross is because the Border Patrol, they're capable, not allowed to stop people from coming into the United States. And I hear so much garbage from people in Washington saying, oh, Republicans don't care. They have no compassion. If they would come down here and do what we did this week, last night, you would find out there is nothing compassionate about luring people hundreds, thousands of miles, dealing with drug cartels, and all of the horrors that go with coming up here. We saw more children than I've seen in all my trips down here, all the time down here. Last night, the horrors, they were scared to death. What would be compassionate? What would be compassionate is to let them stay in their homes without a drug cartel to just corrupt Mexico. Anybody that knows Mexico knows you got natural resources, you have got wonderful people, most have people faith in God, something that made America strong, and you got some of the hardest working people in the world. Mexico ought to be one of the top economies in the world. One reason it's not, and it's because of the drug cartels that the United States is funneling billions of dollars in that's used to corrupt Mexico. You cut that money to a trickle, and Mexico becomes one of the top economies. These people that are coming up here scared and being brutalized as they come, they stay home and they build better homes. And we help Mexico become the country it should be. That is compassion, not luring people away from their homes. That's just an outrage. We ought to be a good neighbor, and we saw it again last night. It's time to enforce the law. Now, I can't say President Biden is intentionally violating his oath. He's violating his oath, but I don't know if he even knows what he's doing intentionally. But regardless, and he needs to have some compassion for the people down here. Let him come down here 1, 2 a.m. and see what's going on. We owe our neighbors better, and I am so thankful to be with these men and women from Texas. They care. And I'd like to introduce a dear friend who knows what it is to spend a life helping people. That's what he's done as a medical doctor. My friend, Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Louis. Always a Burgess. I represent Texas 26 district, northern part of the state, just north of the DFW airport. DFW Airport is not in my district, but the approach is. Look, this is not new, but what's new is how bad it has gotten. It has gotten this bad. One of our objectives here is to amplify what we have been seeing. I'll tell you, one of the things that I've really taken away from this is it's more for the men and women on the front line, Department of Health and Human Services, that they have been tasked to do. Now, the hard thing sense of awareness of what is happening when you pack this many individuals into those Customs and Border Protection holding facilities. They were never intended as many people for as long as they're holding. And if we won't do anything to interrupt the flow in, we're only going to get worse. Yes, there is some seasonal variation. It will be worse in May than it has been in February and March. And we know that from past experience. But what past experience tells us is that when you reach those levels, you really and truly have taken a crisis and turned it into a catastrophe. I really am so grateful to our Brian Babin and Jodey Arrington for organizing this and bringing us down here. I now want to yield the floor to the gentleman from the Beaumont, Texas area, Randy Weber, for his comments.
Thank you all for being here. The Biden border crisis is a travesty. I'm 67 years old. I've lived in the finest country in the world, Texas, for 67 of those years. I've never seen anything like this. The Biden border crisis is an absolute catastrophe, travesty. I will tell you that it's funny that Biden has indeed, and Judge Gomer, you're right, we don't know if he did it intentionally, don't know if he'll remember it, has abdicated his responsibility of protecting Americans. That should be his absolute first priority. And it's kind of funny if you think about it, or maybe it's, I should say, ironic, not funny at all. As head of the Democratic Party, you know, the same ones that want to defund our great police, you know, that party that want to defund our great police, they're the same ones that have accused Donald Trump of colluding with the Russians. Now, let's put this in perspective here, folks. Weren't the Bidens the one that got money from the Russians, from the Chinese, and from the Ukrainians? And now what they're doing, I'm not saying they're getting money from the drug cartel. We're losing our mic. Are we on? Test, are we on? I'm not saying that they're getting money from the drug cartel, but their policy, or maybe I should say lack thereof, of keeping Americans safe, is absolutely enriching the drug cartel. They're making it easy for them to get people across. Now the Democrats have hung out the welcome sign for any and all illegals, including the drug cartel. And they're reaping billions of money. Americans, wake up. Throw the Bidens out of office. Throw the Democrats that don't believe in the sovereignty of our country out of office. Make them pay a price at the polls, because they don't deserve to be controlling any of our border, any of our land, any elected office, in my opinion. Again, the Biden's border policy is an unmitigated disaster. I appreciate you all being here. Now I'm going to yield to my good friend Beth Van Dyne, the mayor of our delegation.
I appreciate that, Congressman Weber. I'm Beth Van Dyne, former mayor of the city of Irving, now congressional member in... There we go. Now I'm a congress member in District 24, which is DFW Airport is right in the middle of it. It also, right around the neighborhood in Dallas is where they have one of the newest decompression centers, where they had 3.5 days to put together a center that within 5 days is at full capacity with 2,300 kids. 2,300 13 to 17-year-old unaccompanied boys. They were brought there because if you could see the situation that these kids are living in today, it would make you cry. And all of you in the press, you should have access to this. You have to see this with your own eyes. Journalists have to write about this yourself. Because I'll tell you, all of us were told not to take pictures, don't take videos. We don't want people knowing what's going on in the outside world. But I'll tell you, no matter what you see from our small lenses is equal to the emotion that you feel when you see it in context. Pod after pod after pod of kids lying on the ground, barely enough room to even see the floor. This capacity, there was maximum capacity of 250 people at the Donna facility we visited yesterday. 250 people, maximum capacity. They had 5,700 people there yesterday. They are trying to move them out as quickly as they can to decompression centers around the country, where they're then filtering them out, processing them through as quickly as possible, and bringing more in. There is no plan. The plan is to make our country basically an open borders country. Now, as mayor, I had a great relationship with ICE. We were not a sanctuary city. We fought against it being a sanctuary country. We had a great relationship with ICE. What we found was when you actually deported criminal, illegal aliens from your city, the crime rate drops. We had the lowest crime rate in our city's history during that time. We became the 5th safest city in the country. Also at that time, we were the fastest growing in our city's history, both economically and population. People want to live in a safe community. What you see down at the border right now is not humane. It is not compassionate. It's horrible, and it must stop. Please welcome Pete Sessions, former chair of the Rules Committee in the Waco area, and a great friend. Pete?
Congresswoman, thank you very much. An opportunity to make my 5th visit down to this. It is very important for us to understand that this administration not only has given the words and viewpoint that is encouraging on our country, but it's important to note that law enforcement has been given their opportunity to see, respond properly to the needs of the people. Of this country are there to protect American citizens, but also private landowners and people who live. What is occurring is that aerostats are being taken down. People who are in law enforcement are being used to do tasks that deal with human needs within their agencies. They're being moved around. The people who are supposed to be on the front line are now doing humanitarian work. This is a problem for not just this valley, but also for the 100,000 a month that then filter into America, that move into urban areas, that then flood our schools, that then flood our hospitals. It is an unmistakable problem for cities. It is an unmistakable problem for the future of costs for this country that this Democratic Party and this president are personally responsible for. Last, if you do not uphold the laws of your country, you fail to have a country with reliable borders, with law enforcement that works effectively, and rule of law. The people who stand behind me had a direct meeting this morning where we talked about who expect the people who are in law enforcement to follow the law. People who are landowners want and need people who will respect that and that they can back that up. We are being overrun with an impression of people that we do not want illegally. America brings in 1 million people legally a year, more than any other country. Wants to do away with law, and they are accountable, and we're going to make it happen. The next person I want to introduce is a member of Congress, but he is new He's served the country in the United White House as a position. Now, Congressman, where are you? Ronnie Jackson.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Well, the good news is I'm the last congressman to talk to you here. I want to point out that I think, what we've seen here on the border is just absolutely unbelievable. And as Congressman Sessions just mentioned, I've been here before. I was up here when I was the chief medical officer, the chief medical advisor to President Trump. He sent me up here to the border numerous times early in the Trump administration when we were still dealing with the issues related to the Obama-era policies that were creating a lot of incentives for folks to come up here. And we saw that. We had a little issue with the measles outbreak. This is much, much worse. I've never seen anything like this. It's been mentioned before. We went to the facility yesterday, and literally if you put one more person into the little cages that they put these people into, you would have been stacking them on top of each other. You couldn't see the floor at all. There was not one spot to put another person in there. And these are essentially, COVID incubators as we, in the environment that we're in right now. I mean, we can't forget that we're in a pandemic. Talking all the time about how we have to continue to socially distance and wear one mask, wear two masks, and make sure that that we continue to keep the pandemic and COVID at the forefront of everything we do. Yet simultaneously, they're allowing hundreds of thousands of unscreened immigrants that we know have a positive rate of about 5 to 10% to come in and to be released into our community. And that's just one part of this tragedy. That's the humanitarian, human tragedy that's going on right now with these immigrants coming across. There's another part to this as well. We've met with all the stakeholders out here since we've been here. We've talked to all of them. They are stretched so thin they cannot do their job out here right now. And we don't have Border Patrol out there protecting our borders right now. You know why? Because they're all at the point of entry processing these people that are coming across in numbers. And Jodey mentioned earlier, President Biden's job is to be the President of the United States, to take care of us, law-abiding citizens, citizens of this country. And that's not happening. He mentioned he's supposed to be our commander-in-chief. He's supposed to be our chief law enforcement officer. He's not. I'll tell you what he is right now. He's functioning as the trafficker-in-chief right now. And I say that because the cartels are in complete control right now. They bring these people up to the border. They don't even have to sneak them across anymore. They just drop them off. And the Biden administration handles the remaining logistics of getting them settled somewhere in this country. And this is a shame. This should not be happening in this country right now. This is going to be a burden to us for many years. While they're doing this, the cartels love this because all the border patrol agents, everybody else tied up processing these people through. They are running large amounts of narcotics across our border. There's human trafficking, there's sex trafficking, there's criminal elements coming across, and it's a free-for-all right now. It's an absolute free-for-all. So we're going to see firsthand over the next few months the human tragedy here with these poor people that are being enticed to come up here at great personal risk and make this journey to come into our country. But we're also going to see the results of the criminal element and the drugs and all the other stuff that's coming across our border. That is also going to take a toll on our country. So that's with that, I'll just close it out. I want to take the opportunity at this point to introduce a great American, Tom Homan, who used to be our director of ICE. Tom, come on up here, and Tom can talk more about the criminal part of it as well.
Okay, you all know me. I'm probably the only guy up here that wore that Border Patrol uniform back in 1984. Let me tell you something. There's not a bigger bunch of American patriots than the men and women of Border Patrol. Amen. And I got to argue with a few people here. I saw compassion the other day on the border. I saw a big burly Border Patrol agent kneel down and talk to a crying child. And within a couple minutes, that child cracked a smile. That's where the compassion is. And you can argue all you want. You can hate President Trump, but no one can argue the fact that he gave us the most secure border in my life. Work for the President of the United States. But the fact is, President Trump did more to secure this border than any president. Probably all five combined. Because Mr. Morgan, I'm sure, is going to talk to you about the numbers. The numbers don't lie. Immigration has historic low. And they want to say this is seasonal
happens every year. That's a bunch of crap. Last March, 33,000 apprehensions. This March, 150,000 apprehensions. Tell me how that's seasonal. That's not seasonal at all. That's based on this administration's politics. Commissioner Morgan's going to talk about what's going on in the border. I want to talk about what happens after the fact, because no one's talking about it. What happens to these thousands of people being released in the United States? They're not going anywhere. They're never leaving. And there's two data points I want to share with you, and I hope you report it, because this administration was aware of it, and so wasn't President Trump. And let me tell you how they handled it differently. If you go to the DOJ website, the Immigration Court website, and look at Central Americans. Let's just use them for example. Out of all the Central Americans that claim fear at the border, that want to file for asylum, 89% because they either don't show up in court or they lose the case. They simply don't qualify. So when you got 9 out of 10 people who claim fear at the border does not get relief from U.S. courts, that tells you we got a problem. President Trump recognized that. In the United States, will never see him again. In Mexico, the second data point that Donald Trump realized was if you go to the Homeland Security Lifeline Report, less than 3% of the families that lost their case, like 90%, that lost their case, less than 3% left. 9 out of 10 committing some sort of fraud at the border, and less than 3% of them leave, you got a problem. President Trump addressed it, saying, I'm not going to allow this to happen anymore. This administration has the same data that I just reported to you. And their answer is, let's release more. Not only release more, let's release them even quicker. I'm sure during the first family surge in FY14, you know what we did? We built the first family residential center. We helped families for about 40 family residential. 90% lost their case. We put them on an airplane and sent them home. Guess what happened? The border numbers plummeted. Then the Ninth Circuit, in their genius ways, they said, you can't hold them for 40 days. You don't hold them for 20. If you make that decision and not allow us to hold them long enough to see a judge, you're going to see border surges like you've never seen before. I put it in my affidavit. What did I was called a fear monger. And guess what happened? They said 20 days, families surged up. We had an unprecedented border surge at that time. These are the facts. And what is this administration doing? They're even going further left than the Ninth Circuit. They're saying 20 days. How about 3? Now, the law says 3 for children, but let's say 3 for families. They're going so far left, they fell off the table a long time ago. Now, I'm talking, I know what's going on, but apparently I really don't know what's going on because I was kicked off the Homeland Security Advisory Council last week. They don't want to hear from a 34-year veteran who wore the uniform, who spent 3 years investigating criminal cartels, who actually dealt with border. They don't want to hear. This administration has no intention of enforcing the law. We got it. All those family groups I talked about that ignore the final order and less than 3% left, what is their penalty for ignoring the judge's order after we put them in front of great taxpayer expense? What's their penalty from hiding and ignoring the order? Their penalty, they're getting in. And these thousands of people being released in the country now, they're not either. Because ICE is not removing fugitives of immigration law. You think that's by accident? They decided to gut ICE at the same time thousands released in the United States, and ICE is the agency responsible for removing people with final orders? This is by design. This isn't incompetence. This isn't they don't know what they're doing. Remember, Joe Biden was vice president during the 14-15 surge they just talked about, and Alejandro Mayorkas is deputy secretary. They know what causes surges. They know how to stop them. I was there. They're the opposite or they know the complete opposite. And I want to started as a Border Patrol agent, and what I've seen the last 2 days, when you got, when these men and women are being attacked and vilified, I know Mark Morgan's going to talk about this because he commanded these brave patriots. They're American heroes, they're American patriots, and it's a shame when their commander-in-chief attacks them, when the secretary don't admit there's a crisis. Me and Mark Morgan were on the team the other day, Border Patrol agent, he actually yelled out to me. I turned around, he walked up to me, he thanked me. And Mark Morgan, he goes, you know what? Our president won't make this a problem. Our secretary won't make this a problem. Thank you and the Commissioner Morgan for out there yelling and screaming, trying to tell American people the truth. You're our only hope. This comes from someone who like this country, and they've been abandoned by this president, the first president who is facilitating illegal immigration. Facilitating. There is no downside to your border. There is no downside in 31% of women not dying. There's no downside in children not dying. There's no downside to illegal narcotics coming across this border. So explain to me why this administration refuses to enforce the law. There's one reason. This is Open Borders' agenda. This is their plan, and it's happening. To Commissioner Mark Morgan, who has much more to say.
Thanks, Tom. So that's a hard act to follow. So as I was sitting here listening to the congressional members and Tom talk, I thought about one thing. Who else should be standing here today? Who else should be standing right where we're standing, the epicenter of the crisis that's been thrown upon us? The President of the United States. Where is he? He's not here. But yet what they're going to do is they're working overtime to make sure, instead of standing here and being about the crisis they've created, that what's happening. Let me provide a couple of stats. This, you're going to see the numbers for 115,000 after. That's last year. Seasonal? No, I don't think so. Last year, under the Trump administration, numbers declined significantly. They have more than doubled over the same time period under this administration. 6,000 a day. UAC have surpassed the highest level numbers that in 2019. You're being told, this is the only thing that put out that is honest, is that you want to see numbers that we haven't seen in over 20 years. Conservative, 1. Entire city of Dallas, Texas, and I'd like to say to Mayorkas, Mr. Secretary, I'm asking you, please stop lying to the brave men and women of the Customs and Border Patrol that Tom talked about. That are out here on our front lines defending this nation. Stop telling the American people that our borders are secure. You know it's a lie. Stop saying that our borders aren't closed. You're being released into the United States. If you're a family in the Western Hemisphere, now you are being released into the interior United States. You were once an enrollee in the remaining, now to our borders and under this administration, if you count UAP release, that number exceeds 45,000. And I'm being conservative. Don't tell me that the borders are closed. And as far as Mr. Secretary, that's another lie. And for 2 hours about borders are open. Stat, one realistic thing that's happening right now. The Border Patrol, and we've been here. We've seen this. This is not our first rodeo. In 2009, crisis, because we knew it was a crisis, they changed their tactics. They started using families and unaccompanied minors as a distraction, using them as a piece of garbage. We saw, Tom and I were out a couple nights ago, we saw in action hundreds of family units and unaccompanied children. The cartels in one area. And so, of course, what happens? The Border Patrol resources, it takes an exhaustive amount of resources to go there and provide the humanitarian assistance that's needed. And so what happens right to our left and right? The border is wide open. It's not monitored. And Mr. Secretary, it is not secure. Drugs are pouring in and criminal aliens are pouring in. Right now, because in some areas, this one being one of them, 40 to 50% of border patrol resources are being pulled off the line, away from their national security mission. And so what's happening right now? They're estimating 1,000 gotaways every day. 1,000 every day. Criminal aliens coming through every single day. 30,000 in a month. No, Mr. Secretary, our borders are not secure. Another thing that I really wanted to mention too, another just complete misdirection, and quite frankly, another lie that this administration is telling. So they create this crisis, and they're trying to spin everybody but themselves. Oh, we weren't notified. There wasn't an adequate transition because the Trump administration was in a disarray as they went out. I'm telling you that's a lie. And it's a lie, and I know it's a lie because I was still there as the acting commissioner of CBP. We provided exhaustive briefings to the transition team. We specifically told them, if you ended MPP, the Migrant Protection Protocol, if you ended Title 42, if you ended the asylum and cooperative agreements with the Northern Triangle country, you will drive an unmitigated crisis that will make 2019 pale in comparison. We told them that again and again. We told them that the surge numbers would skyrocket and the Border Patrol facilities would be overwhelmed. We told them that HHS facilities would be overwhelmed. But they let their ideological hubris make them ignorant and not listen to the very border experts that were telling them that if they did what they've done, we would be exactly where we're at today. And what I want to end with is something that Tom talked about. I also want to talk directly to the incredible women of Customs and Border Protection. Tom mentioned I'm like him. I've served under 6 administrations. I've been serving this country for 35 years in the military and law enforcement. And look, this brings me no pleasure to say, but I watched the President of the United States give a press conference and lied to the American people. He said that we, along with the men and women in CBP, were implicit in returning unaccompanied minors back to the hands of the coyotes, to force them to take the dangerous journey on their own back to their home country. That we left them on the banks of the Rio Grande on the Mexican side to starve to death. That's an absolute lie. It never happened. And that is reckless, that is irresponsible, and it's personally offensive. Let me tell you, as Tom mentioned, let me tell you about the true character and the compassion and the men and women of the CBP, specifically the Border Patrol, that I've personally seen. Last year, thousands of rescues. Just this past week, here in Texas, we have a mother and a daughter and a son drowned trying to come across the Rio Grande River, and the coyotes just left them there. Who do you think responded? Who do you think saved the mom and the son, brought them back to life? Unfortunately, they couldn't bring the daughter, 9-year-old, she died. That's the true character of the men and women. They're not leaving anybody on the banks of any to death. They never return unaccompanied minors to the hands of cartels. We spent an incredible amount of funding and resources and time providing them clothing, food, shelter, medical attention. We 747s at great taxpayers' expense, professional athletic teams charter, and flew them back to their home country. We coordinated extensively with the home country to make sure they had the capacity to receive them. And guess what? Return to their country. That's the truth. So I'm going to finish by saying to the men and women of Customs and Border Patrol Protection, thank you. You're my hero. You're always going to be my hero. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark and Tom. Thank you for your service to our country, and thanks for helping us tell the American people what's really going on. Problem with the cancel and censorship culture, before long it eats everybody up. And now the media can't even get in and have access. We're just trying to help tell you guys what's going on and what we're hearing from the folks who are here on the ground, not in some memo we're getting on our Washington, D.C. With that, one of the most important engagements since arriving yesterday has been to meet and listen with those on the front lines, our local law men and women who are risking their neighborhoods to be adjunct border patrol to fill the gap as was described. A.J. Louderbuck from Jackson County, representing a lot of really good men and women in uniform, and the folks in cowboy hats here representing sheriffs from 13, 14, 15 counties. We appreciate you being here today. A.J., would you come say a word or two?
Thank you, Congressman. First thing we want to do today is thank this Republican delegation for coming here today and brought some shining light on where we need it most. Our hats off to each of the congressmen here today, and appreciate y'all very much. Mark, Tom, longtime friends and associates of mine. I'll tell you what we ought to call today. I'll tell you what we ought to call what y'all print. This is a delegation. Texas, what you have is the truth. With truth comes trust. Maybe the role of Texas sheriff across this United States can help this administration find the truth, or the ability to say the truth out here and illuminate this and bring this problem that we have, this catastrophic crisis that's brought about with Joe Biden's signature on it. President Joe Biden's signature is on this. Maybe, just maybe, with the help of all of us together, with unity and strength as Americans, we can come together and fix this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Well said, and very efficiently said, I might add. They're men of action. Two words, and God bless them, because if they don't act, we're all in trouble. They are on that thin blue line. God bless our men and women in law enforcement. I'm going to ask Richard Garrett to come up here, if you would. I'm putting him on the spot a little bit, but we had the South Texas Landowners Association join us in this global stakeholder dialogue, and probably heard as interesting, important, and new facts as I've heard since I've been here. So would you just share with these folks how this crisis is impacting our local landowners here in Texas?
Yes, sir. Again, my name is Richard Guerra. I'm a rancher. Our ranch is Starr County.
Put that mic closer here.
Starr County, just west of Roma. And where my ranch is, I got 8,000 acres of land. But my southernmost fence is exactly 1 mile from the river. And across the river is Miguel Alemán, Mexico. It is one of the strongholds of the cartels, right there at my doorstep. We hear all the activity that goes on in Mexico because they're so close. Thank these people, all these congressmen, for taking the time and the interest with all of us what our problem is. We do have a crisis. We have, and I had problems before, where people would come across my ranch, trespass, leave gates open, mingle the cattle, in some cases even start a fire just to deviate from what they were doing. I've had armed, thank God, but I have had that. Critical, it is bad, and it is true. Thank God that I have an aerostat, and I can't say enough about that aerostat. This administration is trying to get rid of the aerostat. It is effective, and everything that's been on my ranch, the activity has been curtailed all over. So, short of it. But these guys stand tall in what they believe. And all I can say is thank you, Congressman. Thank you for inviting us. And please listen to us. Every help that we can get that hasn't been mentioned. And I want to thank the Governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, for sending the state to protect us from all the illegal activity that comes across, criminal activity. do their job. Border Patrol does their job. But the state troopers have been a great asset to us. Thank God for that. And the last thing that I will say, and I'll say it in Spanish, thank God that these guys have the huevos from these eggs to stand here and say what they have said. Thank you so much.
All right, yeah. Tell you what, I think I understood him there at the end. I've heard neutered and huevos in a press conference for the first time today, ladies and gentlemen. I think we're back in Texas, Pete. You know, this isn't a slick politician. This is a straight. He didn't know he was going to speak.
No.
I don't know that he knew he was going to speak at a roundtable discussion, like a lot of folks. But they love their country, and out of love for this country, and out of deep concern for their community and their livelihood, they're crying out for help from their federal government and from the country they love. And I'm so thankful for you, Richard. Thanks for sharing that. And folks, we'll take some questions. We got plenty of experts. Yes, ma'am.
Your question about what I said about the Biden administration reversing MPP, that pertains to UACs. That pertains to UACs. And we've got...
That's actually for everybody. It's Title 42.
Title 42, I'm sorry, Title 42, public health restrictions. They have done away with that for the unaccompanied children. For other people, it has not been done away with. So thank you for that question.
Well, I don't know where our friend Louis Gomer went, but we just want the law to be enforced. And the law says you must be detained, you must have your day in court, and then if you don't have a meritorious asylum claim or a lawful reason for being here, you got to go back to your own country, your country of origin. And we'll be compassionate about it. We'll be humane about it, but we must stand firm in that regard, or we have no borders in this country. It's really that simple. And I think when you juxtapose the last administration reducing illegal border crossings by 70+% with this it's real simple. Secure the border, enforce the laws. I'd say turn the magnets off that pull people here and close the loopholes that people are exploiting. But if you just, at a minimum, because Congress has a lot of work to do, we can't put it all on any one administration, but you got to start with securing the border and enforcing the laws. And these poor folks out here, local, state, and federal law enforcement officers, have had their legs completely cut out from under them on account of catching and releasing, on account of no notice to appear, and quite frankly, the Title 42, which we say is still in place, not really. It's partially in place. You got Democrats like Henry Cuellar joining us, telling the truth. He says, I'm getting more information from Mexico and the government officials in Mexico than I am this administration. That's not from a Republican. That's from our friend Henry Cuellar, who we will see later on this evening and have breakfast with him tomorrow. So some of these may be half-heartedly, maybe on paper, still in place, but we can tell you down the line, declaration of emergency, having support and backup from the military, holding accountable sanctuary cities, the list is long, and I'm sure you have access to it, but it's a half-ass deal. Okay, that's what my dad would call it, a half-ass a way to secure the border and enforce the laws at best. At best. Most of it is just completely abdicating the laws on the book and the responsibility. Yes, ma'am.
Did you go to the holding pen at Amplifying Bridge? And if you did, can you detail what you saw?
We did. We did go, we went a lot of places, so it's hard for me to keep track of exactly where, but we went to a bridge. I think it's the bridge you're referring to. There were droves of people coming across and turning themselves in, essentially. I don't know one of them did they their arms. And we already talked about the treacherous journey, the risk that they take, but it is very clear that they've received the message, and these children are really being used as a passport because they know that's their best chance of being released and held unaccountable to stay in this country permanently, and that's clear.
Sir, I need to address this real quick. I have to. Look, what they're not telling you is the Biden administration has given a green light to child traffickers and human traffickers. You know damn well that some of these children over here are being trafficked by criminal organizations. The reason I say that, when I was the ICE director, we had criminal investigations where children were being rented by cartels to post at a family unit. Once they get released, they get back to Mexico and re-rented again. It happens. No one celebrated more this presidency than the criminal cartels in Mexico. They're back in business. That's why I said they're facilitating crime on the border because cartels are making millions of dollars a day. And I'm sick of them saying they're being humane. When you send enticements out that puts the most vulnerable people in the arms of criminal cartels, it's dangerous. To say the Trump administration, shame on them for separating 2,500 families because of parents being prosecuted. U.S. citizen families get separated every day by sheriffs who arrest a U.S. citizen parent who commits a crime with his child. They get separated. This administration has already caused 17,000 family separations. Parents putting their children in the hands of criminal cartels. That's what's happening. And the reason I get so emotional about this, whether I'm testifying in front of Congress or on TV, is because I've seen the results. I've talked to women who were raped over 20 times making that journey. I've held dead children in my arms. This administration, I said it when they announced it, the death's going to come. You're going to see more rapes, you're going to see more deaths. Because you entice a vulnerable population, they're going to come. That's why this administration needs to go back, turn on the Remain in Mexico program. They'll still get their hearings, but they're not going to put themselves in the hands of criminal cartels. There's nothing humane about that. I've seen what these cartels can do. If they can't pay their smuggling fee, they will be tortured. Arizona can't pay a smuggling fee. They say, well, get Chicago 10,000. Once they get to the stash house, they call the family 20,000. We can't afford it. They will call the family and torture that alien and let the family listen to it because they couldn't pay their smuggling fees. If they couldn't pay, they kill them, and they did. Criminal cartels have been empowered by this administration. People are going to die. That's the problem with this, and I've seen it. I've seen it. I've investigated it. It's a fact. That's what the danger is here. It's not only have a lawless border, people will die, and only the bad guys are going to win.
Pete Sessions.
I want to offer a speaker here real quickly who spoke to us at breakfast this morning. And he has a very clear message that we need to hear because I think it's important. Mr. Ramirez, do you mind coming up and taking a minute with us? And I hope you'll, I've asked him to do something that I feel very strongly about, sir.
Gracias, congresista. Le quiero dar el agradecimiento a todos los de la prensa de estar aquí. Muchas gracias a todos los congresistas, a los oficiales, a los sheriffes, a los rancheros por estar con nosotros ahora. Esto es una causa muy importante. No se puede negar de lo que está pasando. Necesitamos ponerle atención a toda la gente que está aquí, la que está en las líneas de enfrente, peleando y soportar toda esa gente y la gente que puede hacer esto son estos señores y señoras que nos pueden ayudar en Congreso. Otra vez, muchas gracias por acompañarnos aquí y a la prensa, a la rueda de prensa, que estén aquí ahora apoyando a esta causa. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. This is important because the people who live in this area, who have come legally to our country and who call America home, care very much about what is happening to our country and what our country would become also. And that is where rule of law would not be important. And this is what is causing so many people to flee. It is from drug cartels and governments that are corrupt, that will not protect its own people. And yet when you come here and you're legal and you have a business and you expect people to have a system that works, and that system that needs to work is what this gentleman just spoke about. He spoke about a system that needs to work properly and how people who are back here stand for rule of law, the big dream, America, but that where we have control of our border through legal process. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. And ma'am, just to put a fine point there on your question, it was an example of how border patrol agents were taken off task of their security mission to process and to care for these folks, and the gaping hole it leaves. We talked to the drug enforcement, but just behind you leave a gaping hole for criminal activity. So we expect to see more acceleration and exacerbation of the gangs, the crime, the drugs, on account of these folks being taken off. Yes, sir.
Two more questions.
I wonder if you can give us your thoughts. You were just there at CBP not too long ago, and you see what just had happened in the last 2 to 3 months. We stopped 180, more or less. What are your my friend, get this mic closer.
Sure. Well, like I said, you're exactly right. This is a 180. At the what we've been saying, at the stroke of a pen, this president, through executive orders, has dismantled every single effective tool, authority, and policy that we had to effectively mitigate the crisis that we saw in 2019. Look, you don't have to take our word for it. You don't have to take their word. Look at the stats. The numbers don't lie. March of last year, the numbers had plummeted to 33,000. This March, 150,000. Like I said, a 350% increase. You can't deny those numbers. And let's go across the board. Again, UACs, the highest unaccompanied per month that we have seen in history. It's going to be the highest level numbers we've seen in over 20 years. And talk about the gaping hole. Let's talk about facts. Again, we saw this in 2019. We're seeing it right now. 50% of Border Patrol resources being pulled off the line. We had that stopped. I'll give another quick stat. Last year, we had less than 800 individuals in our custody, CBP. Less than 800, which is exactly the point behind the CDC's order to further reduce the introduction of COVID-19 into our country from outside our borders. And one of the biggest things is we want to eliminate the number of people that we had in our open-air congregate settings because they're COVID petri dishes. 800, that was a pretty good number, and we were trying to get it lower. Guess how many they have in custody now? Over 10,000. How is that right? How is that humane? You've heard that from everybody. So when people ask what has changed, everything imaginable that gave us the ability to handle and mitigate the crisis has gone away in a matter of a few weeks. And we said, I'm going to say it, I told you so, right? Is that before the election, we were out there, and I too, I was called a fear monger like Tom was, and I was called a Trump sycophant because I said, if any administration said they were going to do, that you would create a crisis, an unmitigated crisis that would make 2019 pale in comparison. And here's where I got it wrong. I thought maybe by May we'd be about 100,000. We hit that last. So everything that was in place, and we're just touching the tip of the iceberg, talking about MPP is gone. So to answer your question, MPP has been removed for everybody. They ceased that on day one. It went further than that, though, right? So they didn't just stop our ability, right, to enroll new people in MPP, which ended catch and release, which was the most significant incentive for people. They knew if they came to the border in 2019 with a family, they were going to be released into the interior United States, as Tom Holman, the Patriot, said, never to be heard from again. MPP ended that. And you saw the numbers plummet by February 2020 by 75%. So not only did they end MPP, but they went a step further. And now they said everybody that was previously enrolled in MPP, we're actually going to bring you back, and they've already done it, and release them into the interior United States. ACAs, I got to mention this because this is a good question. The ACAs, the Asylum Cooperative Agreements, these were unprecedented agreements with the Northern Triangle countries, along with MPP. By the way, so what did this administration do? Immediately rip up all the agreements we had with all these countries to address it as the regional crisis that unprecedented agreements that were working. We were working this crisis together as countries across the board. And they dismantled that agreement. They dismantled that cooperation. The ACAs, look, we got to where the international standard is. And the international standard should be, if you have a valid asylum claim, isn't the most humane thing is to encourage people with a valid asylum claim to seek relief and assistance in the first country they come to? Isn't that the most humane thing? This administration ripped up that policy. So now they're back in the hands of the cartels, form shopping and coming all the way, and they're abused. We could go on and on and on. So I know that's a long answer because I get fired up, but everything you can imagine has been changed.
Well, you have lawmakers back here who will also this, to add insult to injury. At the height of this new surge of illegal immigrants and the overwhelming situation that we've described, Democrats in the House passed a bill, a partisan bill, to grant amnesty, mass amnesty and a path to citizenship for people who cut the line and are here in this country illegally. So on top of that, you've got insult to injury for the American people and the pain and suffering that you've heard and we've seen on the faces of our fellow Americans. You also had another law that was a bill that passed the House on a pure partisan basis. It said DHS, the Homeland Security Department, could not share information with local law enforcement. It also said we're going to not use the word illegal anymore. We're just going to say non-citizen. It also gave folks who come across our border and violate our laws and sovereignty the ability from taxpayer funding to have legal counsel. The list of horrible ideas that only add, if not gasoline to the fire of chaos that burns on the border, certainly insults the intelligence of the American people. And then this president makes an announcement that Kamala Harris, his vice president, is going to be the border czar. You remember the last surge in 19? She said that's a distraction from real issues. She called what the agents who worked for these gentlemen, she called what they did to simply enforce the immigration laws a reign of terror. Compared them to the KKK. She wants to decriminalize border crossings, and she wants to give Medicare. Even though in less than 10 years, Medicare is bankrupt. Guys, you can't make this stuff up. The list is too long, as we said. I'm going to take one more question, maybe two more questions from One American News. Jen, fire away. By the way, Brian Babin mentioned that we did invite, as soon as we understood that Kamala Harris, our vice president, was in charge. In fact, I think the president's words were, she doesn't have to consult with me. She's going to go down there and fix it. And then that was right before she said she wasn't going to come to the border. She's the border czar. She's not coming to the border. But we invited her to join us on this trip because we wanted her to see what we've seen and hear what we've heard. Jen.
funding that? What's the situation going on there?
Will somebody answer her question? Some pictures of it, I can't explain that, but I know it exists, and so.
It's a good point. Look, this isn't a border issue. This is a United States issue. These families want all the place. They're being bused to certain bus stations being released. They're releasing some to NGOs. Mentioned, you know, we're simply completing the criminal alien smuggling. I mean, I'm sure some of these families there are hard to bring their kids to the border. You know, the administration will give the rest of the way. So they're going all over the country. I mean, we know there's Chicago, New York, Maryland, Washington State. Most of them are headed to sanctuary cities. Why? Because law enforcement won't work with ICE. Which, you know, the Biden administration said, well, you know, murders and aggravated felonies are still important, but they haven't, matter of fact, they dropped the lawsuit against sanctuary cities. So even though murderers and rapists could still be a priority for ICE, they're going to be released from sanctuary jails every day, despite what the president says, because he purposely ignored the sanctuary cities on the issue. They are going to all 50 states. This issue we're dealing with in Texas is a national issue. Sanctuary cities is now a sanctuary country, because this administration meant it to be that way.
Tom, if I can jump in real quick. So this is a very important question, because it's important what's happening. So when the Biden administration says they're going to start managing the crisis, we need to pay attention. The crisis is 180 degrees from when we were managing the crisis under the Trump administration. Under the Trump administration, managing the crisis meant we did everything we could to prevent, apprehend, detain, and you just described. These are my words. Don't attribute to these guys. These are my words. I believe this is a systematic cover-up of this administration to cover up the catastrophic crisis that they created by not simply releasing people on the border. They're pushing them out into the further interior of the United States, so it doesn't appear like the crisis that it is. And when they say they're going to get a handle on this, this is what they mean. They're going to create and get really good at creating reception centers on our borders, and they're going to start releasing people as fast as humanly possible. So Tom and I, what we've been saying, on the front end, they're going to create reception centers, release them as fast as possible to cover up the catastrophic crisis, and on the back end, we have a sanctuary country. That's what this administration means by managing the crisis.
Sounds like this border crisis is coming to a town near you. National crisis, great concern. We are grateful. I'm going to say it again, on behalf of my colleagues in Congress and those who are standing behind us and beside us in this endeavor, we are so appreciative that you guys would take the time to cover this. I know you have more questions, and some of these guys will stick around and answer them. We'll just do some one-on-one interviews if that's okay, because I think we're running out of time. Hey, God bless all of you here in McAllen, your local media, our national media that traveled to be here with us, and especially God bless the men and women in uniform, the Border Patrol folks, the ICE folks, our local and state lawmen and women. God bless them, and God bless America. Thank you all.
Yes, I'm
going to pre-write it, so it'll be out today. Yeah, well, oh yeah, no, that's